The smell of pine needles and damp earth always calmed me. That's why I bought this place. A little A-frame cabin tucked away in the foothills of the Appalachians. It was my sanctuary, my escape from the concrete jungle and the constant hum of city life. It was mine. I'd saved for years, scrimping and sacrificing, to finally afford this little slice of heaven. The phone buzzed, shattering the peaceful silence. I glanced at the caller ID. Mom. I debated letting it go to voicemail. Lately, every conversation with my parents felt like walking on eggshells, a minefield of unspoken expectations and passive-aggressive jabs. But ignoring Mom never ended well. "Hey, Mom," I said, forcing a cheerful tone. "Liam, darling. How are you? Did you get that leak in the roof fixed?" "Yeah, Mom. Finally got around to it. Just finished, actually. What's up?" There was a pause, a beat too long, and I felt a knot of unease tighten in my stomach. "It's about Sarah," she said, her voice dropping a notch, becoming laced with that patented motherly concern that usually preceded bad news. Sarah was my older sister, 3 years my senior, and a master of chaos. She was beautiful, charismatic, and perpetually embroiled in some sort of drama. This time, the drama was of the marital kind. Sarah was getting divorced from Mark, her husband of 5 years. 5 years of lavish spending, lavish parties, and, apparently, lavish infidelity. "What about Sarah?" I asked, already bracing myself. "Well, it's complicated. The divorce is getting nasty, Liam. Really nasty. Mark is being difficult." "Difficult how?" I prodded, suspicion prickling at the back of my neck. "He's demanding a significant settlement." "A very significant settlement," Mom emphasized. "He claims." "Well, he claims Sarah mismanaged their finances, that she used marital assets to." "Well, it doesn't matter the details. The point is, he's asking for a sum that's unattainable." "And why are you telling me this, Mom?" I asked, my voice dangerously level. I knew where this was going. I felt it. Another agonizing pause. "We were hoping that you might be able to help." My blood ran cold. "Help how? Liam, darling, you know how much we love you both. We just want what's best for Sarah, for her to get through this difficult time without being financially ruined. And you have that lovely house." The words hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Lovely house, my sanctuary, my escape. The tangible representation of years of hard work and sacrifice. "You want me to sell my house," I stated, the words flat and devoid of emotion. It wasn't a question. "Liam, it's a temporary solution. Once Sarah gets back on her feet." Her voice trailed off, as if even she didn't believe the words she was saying. "Get back on her feet?" "Mom, she's never been on her feet. She's always relied on someone else to bail her out. First you and Dad, now Mark, and now me?" The anger was bubbling up, a hot, corrosive force. "Liam, please don't be like that. This is your sister's future we're talking about. And what about my future, Mom? What about everything I've worked for? What about my dreams?" The silence on the other end was deafening. I need to think about it," I finally managed to say, my voice trembling slightly. "Of course, darling. But please, think of Sarah. She's really struggling." The line went dead. I stared at the phone, my hand shaking. The tranquility of the woods felt tainted, poisoned by the insidious suggestion that I should sacrifice everything for my sister's self-inflicted wounds. I walked out onto the porch, the crisp mountain air doing little to cool the burning resentment in my chest. I looked out at the trees, the rolling hills, the place where I finally felt at peace. And the thought of losing it all for Sarah made me physically ill. This was going to be a war, and I knew, deep down, that it would be a war fought not just with my sister and her soon-to-be ex-husband, but with my own parents. A war for my future, for my sanity, and for the right to say no. The days that followed were a relentless barrage of phone calls, guilt trips, and emotional manipulation. Mom called every morning, Dad every evening, each armed with a new angle of attack, a new reason why I should reconsider. Sarah even chimed in, her voice dripping with a saccharine sweetness that I hadn't heard since we were kids. "Liam, you know I wouldn't ask if it wasn't absolutely necessary," she'd cooed. "Mark is being such a jerk. He's threatening to take everything. He even said he'd try to get custody of the dog." The dog? That was her go-to emotional blackmail. She knew how much I loved animals, but I wasn't buying it. Not this time. I stood my ground. I refused to budge. Every time they brought up the house, I changed the subject, deflected, or simply hung up. I knew I was hurting them, but I couldn't bring myself to cave. This wasn't about money. It was about principle. It was about finally setting a boundary, about finally saying enough was enough. The pressure was immense. I started having trouble sleeping. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, heart pounding, drenched in sweat, haunted by visions of Sarah's tear-streaked face and my parents' disappointed stares. I started isolating myself, avoiding calls from friends, dreading any social interaction. One afternoon, I came home from a hike to find a car parked in my driveway. It was a sleek, black Mercedes, the kind Sarah always dreamed of owning. My stomach clenched. Sarah was sitting on the porch swing, her eyes red and puffy. She looked pathetic. It was a stark contrast to the perfectly manicured, impeccably dressed image she usually projected. "Liam," she said, her voice a choked whisper, "can we talk?" I hesitated, but I couldn't bring myself to turn her away. I knew this was a trap, a calculated attempt to appeal to my sympathy, but I couldn't just leave her sitting there, looking so utterly broken. "Okay," I said, my voice tight, "but I'm not changing my mind." She sniffled and nodded. "I know. I just wanted you to see how bad things are." She launched into a sob story about Mark's alleged cruelty, his financial misdeeds, his plans to destroy her. She painted herself as the victim, the innocent bystander caught in the crossfire of a ruthless divorce. She conveniently omitted any mention of her own role in the situation. I listened in silence, my face an impassive mask. I'd heard it all before. The only thing that surprised me was how easily she could still turn on the waterworks. After an hour of this, she finally got to the point. "Liam, please," she begged, her voice cracking. Just consider a loan. A short-term loan. I promise I'll pay you back. I'll get a job. I'll do anything. A loan." It was a slight improvement over selling my house outright, but it was still a non-starter. I knew Sarah. Anything usually meant relying on someone else to foot the bill. "Sarah, I can't," I said, my voice firm. "I'm not a bank. I don't have that kind of money lying around. And even if I did, I wouldn't." "You wouldn't what, Liam? You wouldn't help your own sister?" she screamed, her carefully constructed facade crumbling. "You'd rather see me lose everything? You'd rather see me homeless?" "Don't put words in my mouth, Sarah," the first snapped. "This isn't about me not wanting to help you. It's about you taking responsibility for your own actions. It's about you learning to stand on your own 2 feet." Her face twisted with anger. "You're so selfish, Liam. You always have been. You think you're so perfect, living out here in your little cabin judging everyone else. Well, guess what? You're not perfect. You're just alone." The words hit me harder than I expected. There was a grain of truth in them. I had retreated into myself, into the safety of my solitude. But it was a choice I had made, a choice born out of necessity. "Get out, Sarah," I said, my voice trembling with rage. "Just get out." She stormed off the porch, slamming the car door behind her. The Mercedes roared to life and sped away, leaving a cloud of dust and bitterness in its wake. I stood there, on my porch, feeling utterly drained. The confrontation had left me shaken, vulnerable. but it had also hardened my resolve. I wasn't going to let her or my parents bully me into sacrificing my future for her mistakes. I went inside, locked the door, and poured myself a stiff drink. As I sat there, staring into the amber liquid, I knew that this was just the beginning. The war was far from over. The next few weeks were eerily quiet. The phone calls stopped, the visits ceased. It was as if I had been banished from the family, exiled for my refusal to comply. At first, I relished the silence. I enjoyed the peace and solitude, the absence of pressure and guilt. But as the days turned into weeks, a nagging sense of unease began to creep in. Something felt wrong. Too wrong! One evening, I was scrolling through Facebook when I saw a post from a mutual friend. It was a picture of Sarah, looking radiant and happy, standing in front of a brand new, sprawling mansion. The caption read, "Congratulations, Sarah, on your beautiful new home. So happy for you, my blood ran cold." A new home? How could she afford a new home when she was supposedly on the verge of financial ruin? I clicked on the comments section, hoping to find some explanation. And there it was, buried beneath a string of congratulatory messages. "Mark really came through. So glad you got everything you wanted." Mark came through? A sickening realization dawned on me. The divorce wasn't about Mark being difficult. It was about something else entirely. Something far more sinister. I needed to know the truth. I reached out to a contact I had from my college days, a guy named David who now worked as a paralegal at a prestigious law firm in the city. We hadn't spoken in years, but I remembered him being sharp and resourceful. "David, it's Liam. Liam Walker. From State U? Liam. Wow. Long time no see. What's up? I need a favor, David." "A big one." "It's about a divorce case. A friend of mine is going through a messy split, and I think there might be something fishy going on." I explained the situation to him, omitting the part about my family's involvement. I told him about Sarah's supposed financial woes, the exorbitant settlement Mark was demanding, and the sudden appearance of the new house. "Sounds like something's not adding up," David said, his voice thoughtful. "Give me the case details. I'll see what I can dig up." A week later, David called me back. His voice was grave. "Liam, you were right. Something is definitely not right with this case. The settlement agreement is sealed, which is unusual. But I managed to get my hands on some preliminary financial documents. And what I found, well, it's pretty damning." "What is it?" I asked, my heart pounding in my chest. "It appears that Sarah and Mark have been systematically transferring assets out of their joint accounts for the past 2 years. They've been funneling money into offshore accounts, shell corporations, and, get this, a trust fund set up in your name." "My name?" "What?" I gasped. "A trust fund? In my name?" "Yeah. It looks like they were planning to use you as a fall guy. They were going to claim that you were the beneficiary of these hidden assets, that you were secretly profiting from their scheme. They were setting you up to take the blame if things went south." I was speechless. Sarah and Mark had been plotting against me, using me as a pawn in their twisted game. They had been willing to sacrifice me to protect their ill-gotten gains. "But why?" I stammered. "Why would they do that?" My guess? Insurance. If the divorce got too messy, if the authorities started sniffing around, they could throw you under the bus. They could claim that you were the mastermind behind the whole operation, that they were just following your instructions. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. I couldn't believe that my own sister, my own family, would be capable of such betrayal. "There's more," David continued. "It looks like your parents are involved." My heart sank. I knew it. I knew something was off about their desperation for me to sell my house. "Involved how?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "They're listed as co-signatories on some of the offshore accounts. They knew about the asset transfers. They were complicit in the whole scheme. The world seemed to spin around me. My parents, the people I had always trusted, The people who were supposed to protect me had betrayed me in the worst possible way. They had conspired with my sister and her husband to defraud the government, hide assets, and frame me for their crimes. I don't know what to say, I managed to choke out. Liam, you need to protect yourself. This is serious. You need to talk to a lawyer. And you need to cut all ties with your family. They're toxic. I thanked David for his help and hung up the phone. I sat there, in stunned silence, trying to process what I had just learned. The pain, the betrayal, the sheer audacity of it all was almost too much to bear. My family had asked me to sell my house to fund Sarah's divorce. But the divorce was a lie. The financial struggles were a fabrication. It was all a carefully orchestrated charade, designed to conceal their criminal activity and protect their stolen wealth. And I had almost fallen for it. I stood up, my body trembling with anger and a newfound sense of purpose. I wasn't going to let them get away with this. I wasn't going to be their scapegoat. The war had just begun, and this time, I was ready to fight back. I needed a plan. I couldn't confront them directly. Not yet. I needed to gather evidence, to build a case, to ensure that I had irrefutable proof of their crimes. I hired a lawyer, a seasoned professional named Miss Evans, who specialized in white-collar crime. She listened intently as I recounted the entire story, her expression growing increasingly grim. "This is a complex situation, Liam," she said, "but it's not insurmountable. We need to gather as much evidence as possible. Bank statements, emails, financial records, anything that can link your family to these offshore accounts and shell corporations." I spent the next few weeks working tirelessly with Miss Evans, poring over documents, tracking down witnesses, piecing together the puzzle of their financial machinations. It was a grueling process, but I was determined to uncover the truth. Meanwhile, the first maintained a facade of normalcy with my family. I answered their calls, responded to their emails, even agreed to meet them for dinner. I played the role of the forgiving son, the understanding brother, all while secretly gathering evidence against them. The dinner was excruciating. We met at a fancy restaurant in the city, the kind of place Sarah loved. My parents were their usual selves, Mom fussing over my appearance, Dad peppering me with questions about my job. Sarah, however, was different. She was unusually quiet, her eyes darting nervously around the room. "So, Liam," Dad said, his voice jovial, "have you given any more thought to, helping Sarah out?" I took a deep breath and forced a smile. "Actually, Dad, I have. And I think I might have a solution." Their faces lit up with hope. "Really?" Mom exclaimed. "What is it?" "Well," I said, pausing for dramatic effect, "I've decided to invest in Sarah's future. I'm going to donate all my savings to a trust fund I recently discovered, offshore." The blood drained from their faces. Sarah gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "What? What are you talking about, Liam?" Dad stammered, his voice trembling. "Oh, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "That trust fund you and Sarah set up in my name? The one with all the hidden assets?" I thought it was a lovely gesture. The silence in the room was deafening. "Liam, you don't understand," Mom pleaded, her eyes wide with fear. "It's not what you think." "Oh, I think I understand perfectly," I said, my voice hard. "You used me. You lied to me. You betrayed me. And you almost got away with it." "We were just trying to protect you, Liam," Sarah cried, her voice shrill. "You don't understand what's at stake." "Protect me?" I scoffed. "By framing me for your crimes? By sacrificing my future to save your own skin?" I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents. Bank statements, emails, transfer records. The evidence of their guilt, laid bare for all to see. "I have everything," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "I know about the offshore accounts, the shell corporations, the asset transfers. I know about the whole scheme. My parents and sister stared at the documents, their faces pale and drawn. They knew they were caught. "What are you going to do, Liam?" Dad asked, his voice barely audible. "I'm going to do what's right," I said, my voice resolute. "I'm going to turn this evidence over to the authorities. And I'm going to watch as you all face the consequences of your actions." Sarah burst into tears. Mom began to sob uncontrollably. Dad just sat there, his head in his hands, defeated. I stood up and walked out of the restaurant, leaving them to wallow in their guilt and despair. As I stepped out into the night air, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The war was far from over, but I had taken the first crucial step towards justice. The aftermath was devastating. The authorities launched a full-scale investigation into my family's finances. My parents and Sarah were indicted on multiple charges, including fraud, money laundering, and tax evasion. Mark, having flipped on his wife and in-laws, received a lighter sentence in exchange for his testimony. The media descended upon our family like vultures, eager to feast on the scandal. Our names were splashed across the headlines, our faces plastered on television screens. We became pariahs, ostracized by friends, neighbors, and colleagues. My parents were stripped of their wealth, their reputations ruined. They lost their home, their cars, their social standing. They were forced to face the reality of their actions, the consequences of their greed and deceit. Sarah, who had always relied on her looks and charm to get by, found herself alone and abandoned. Her marriage was over, her career in tatters. She was forced to confront the fact that her life was a sham, built on lies and manipulation. I, too, suffered the consequences of their actions. I lost friends, alienated family members, and endured countless hours of questioning by investigators and lawyers. My life was turned upside down. But despite the pain and turmoil, I didn't regret my decision. I knew that I had done the right thing. I had exposed the truth, held my family accountable for their crimes, and protected myself from becoming their scapegoat. As the legal proceedings dragged on, I tried to rebuild my life. I focused on my work, my hobbies, and my friendships. I sought therapy to help me cope with the trauma of my family's betrayal. I realized that I couldn't change the past, but I could control the future. I could choose to forgive, to heal, and to move on. The trial was a circus. The prosecution presented a mountain of evidence, meticulously detailing my family's fraudulent activities. My parents and Sarah mounted a weak defense, claiming that they were victims of circumstance, that they had been misled by Mark, that they had only been trying to protect their family. The jury didn't buy it. They found my parents and Sarah guilty on all counts. They were sentenced to lengthy prison terms, their lives irrevocably altered. Years passed. The dust settled. The scandal faded from the headlines. I moved on with my life, building a new circle of friends, pursuing my passions, and finding happiness in my own way. One day, I received a letter. It was from my mother. I hesitated before opening it. I hadn't spoken to her since the trial. I wasn't sure if I was ready to forgive her, to face the pain of our past. But curiosity got the better of me. I tore open the envelope and began to read. The letter was filled with remorse and regret. Mom apologized for her actions, for her betrayal, for the pain she had caused me. She acknowledged that she had been wrong, that she had let greed and ambition cloud her judgment. She wrote about the hardships she had faced in prison, the loneliness, the shame. She said that she had finally come to understand the true value of family, of honesty, of integrity. She ended the letter with a plea for forgiveness. She asked if I would ever be willing to see her, to talk to her, to try to rebuild our relationship. I sat there, staring at the letter, tears streaming down my face. I didn't know what to do. Could I forgive her? Could I ever trust her again? I thought about the good times we had shared, the memories of my childhood, the love that had once bound us together. I thought about the pain and betrayal, the lies and deceit. I realized that forgiveness wasn't about condoning their actions. but about releasing myself from the burden of anger and resentment. It was about choosing to heal, to move on, to find peace. I decided to visit her. The prison was a bleak and depressing place. The air was thick with despair, the walls stained with neglect. I was led to a small visiting room. Mom was already there, waiting for me. She looked older, thinner, and more worn than I remembered. Her eyes were filled with sadness and remorse. We sat in silence for a moment, taking each other in. Then she spoke. "Liam," she said, her voice trembling. I don't know what to say. "I'm so sorry. I've ruined everything." I reached across the table and took her hand. "I know, Mom," I said, my voice soft. "But it's okay. We can start over." We talked for hours. We talked about the past, the present, and the future. We talked about the pain, the regret, and the hope. I learned that Mom had truly changed. She had come to terms with her mistakes, accepted responsibility for her actions, and dedicated herself to making amends. She had started a support group for inmates, helping them to find redemption and purpose. She had become a mentor, a counselor, a source of hope for those who had lost everything. I realized that she was no longer the same person who had betrayed me. She had become someone new, someone stronger, someone more compassionate. I forgave her. Our relationship would never be the same, but we had taken the first step towards healing. We had found a way to connect, to communicate, to rebuild our bond. Sarah, however, remained unrepentant. She refused to acknowledge her wrongdoing, blaming everyone else for her problems. She remained bitter and resentful, trapped in her own self-pity. I tried to reach out to her, to offer her forgiveness and support, but she rejected my attempts. She was not ready to face the truth, to take responsibility for her actions. I realized that I couldn't force her to change. I could only offer her my love and support, and hope that one day she would find her own way to heal. The years that followed were a journey of healing and redemption. I continued to visit Mom in prison, offering her my love and support. We grew closer, our bond strengthening with each passing day. I also began to volunteer at a local charity, working with underprivileged children. I found purpose in helping others, in making a difference in their lives. I realized that I couldn't let my family's past define me. I had to create my own future, a future built on honesty, integrity, and compassion. I sold my cabin in the foothills and moved to a small town near the prison where Mom was incarcerated. I wanted to be closer to her, to support her in her journey towards redemption. I bought a small house, started a new job, and began to build a new life. I found happiness in the simple things: a walk in the park, a cup of coffee with a friend, a quiet evening at home. One day, Mom was released from prison. It was a joyous occasion. I was there to greet her, to welcome her back into the world. We moved in together, sharing my small house. We supported each other, healed together, and rebuilt our lives. Sarah never did come around. The last I heard, she'd moved to another state and was working at a diner. I still hold a place in my heart for her, but some bridges, sadly, just can't be rebuilt. Life isn't perfect, and there will always be scars, but I am at peace. I learned a valuable lesson. Family isn't always blood. Sometimes, family is who stands by you when everyone else has walked away. As for me, I finally found my own way. A path paved with forgiveness, resilience, and the unwavering belief in the power of hope. And that, in the end, is all that truly matters. Years later, long after Mom had passed away peacefully, having lived a quiet and fulfilling life dedicated to helping others, I received another letter. This one was postmarked from a small town in Arizona. The return address was unfamiliar. Curiosity piqued. I opened it. The handwriting was shaky and uneven, but undeniably familiar. It was from Sarah. Inside was a single sheet of paper, filled with lines of labored script. "Liam, I don't know if you'll even read this. I know I don't deserve it if you don't. It's been a long time, longer than I care to admit, and a lot has happened. Mostly bad. I've made a mess of things, Liam. A real mess. Remember that diner I was working at? Well, I got fired. Again. I can't seem to hold down a job, or a relationship, or anything really. I've been thinking a lot lately. About Mom, about Dad, about everything that happened, and about you. For a long time I blamed you, Liam. I blamed you for everything. I blamed you for turning us in, for ruining our lives. I thought you were being selfish, that you were just trying to hurt us. But I was wrong. So wrong. It took me a long time to see it, but you were the only one who was right. You were the only one who had the courage to do what was right. You were the only one who was trying to protect yourself. And in the end, you ended up protecting all of us from ourselves. I'm not asking for your forgiveness, Liam. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know. I wanted you to know that I understand. I understand what you did and why you did it. And I'm sorry. I don't have much left, Liam. I'm broke, alone, and sick. But I have one thing, the truth. I hope you're doing well. I hope you're happy. And I hope that someday, maybe, you can find it in your heart to forgive me. Your sister. Sarah, I sat there, holding the letter in my hands, tears blurring my vision. It was a small gesture, a simple apology, but it meant the world to me. Sarah had finally seen the truth. After all these years, she had finally acknowledged her wrongdoing, taken responsibility for her actions, and asked for forgiveness. It was too late to rebuild our relationship, too late to make amends, but it wasn't too late for closure. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in a box with other mementos of my family. It was a reminder of the pain, the betrayal, and the redemption that had shaped my life. I never saw Sarah again. A few months later, I received word that she had passed away. I wasn't surprised. I attended her funeral, a small, somber affair. There were only a handful of people there, mostly strangers. But as I stood there, paying my respects, I felt a sense of peace. Sarah had finally found her peace, and so had I. The cycle of pain and betrayal was finally broken. The wounds had finally healed. The past was finally behind me. I walked away from the graveside, leaving behind the ghosts of my family. I looked up at the sky, a brilliant expanse of blue, and took a deep breath. I was free. I was finally free to live my life, to pursue my dreams, to find happiness in my own way. The journey had been long and arduous, filled with pain, loss, and betrayal. But it had also been a journey of growth, resilience, and ultimately, redemption. I had learned that forgiveness is not about forgetting, but about letting go. It's about releasing yourself from the burden of anger and resentment, and choosing to move on. I had learned that family is not always defined by blood, but by love, loyalty, and support. It's about standing by each other through thick and thin, and forgiving each other's mistakes. And I had learned that life is precious, fragile, and fleeting. It's about making the most of every moment, embracing the joys and weathering the storms. As I walked away from the cemetery, I knew that I was ready to face the future. I was ready to embrace the unknown, to pursue my dreams, and to find happiness in my own way. I had been through hell and back, but I had emerged stronger, wiser, and more resilient than ever before. And that, in the end, was all that truly mattered.